I gotta find water.
5 o'clock. Okay. Call the special meeting of March 21st, 2023. Call to order. I'm in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Edson?
Here.
Councilman Mudgett?
Here.
Councilman Kaufman?
Here.
Councilman Allison?
Here.
Mayor Graves?
Don't hear anything yet. Okay, we've got the agenda for the special meeting. A motion to approve the meeting in place of record.
So move.
Agenda, I said. All in favor?
Aye.
First item of business will be ordinance 840, third and final reading.
You had no changes?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 840, rezoning 1950 South Road to general business.
Second.
Third and final reading. We got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passed. Second item under business is a project update.
Well, is it better if I stand up at the podium?
Or do we need it? Yeah, so yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning. I have not met a couple of you. So, Josh Morse with Ardura. Our company's been your airport engineer for well over 10 plus years, I believe. 30 different people. So, really today what I wanted to give you an update on was, the first one is we are working to acquire you guys a piece of snow removal equipment for use at the airport. As part of the infrastructure bill that was passed last year, most airports your size, you guys were allotted, you're getting an extra $159,000 a year of federal entitlement grant monies to buy equipment or do maintenance, well, not necessarily maintenance, but infrastructure projects at the airport. So, in working with Candy and everybody else, we kind of, when that money came out, we came to the determination that a good project for your community would be to hire a piece of snow removal equipment at the airport. So right now, I believe you use your town plows that you need to do. Not necessarily the most efficient way to do it. So buy you a piece of specific equipment. So we started writing the contract documents and specifications last year, and we're through the process. We just did our 95% design review meeting with the FAA today, pushing through the final documents next week and putting the project out to bid. And we're planning to do bid opening on May 4th. And so essentially the piece of equipment it's a 100 and some horsepower tractor, with a cab, and it'll have a box plow. And then we're also trying to set it up so that we can get you like a broom attachment and a rotary plow attachment. Should be really nice, and hopefully be able to help you guys out there at the airport. And the FAA doesn't want you to use it for this, but secondarily, you can use it as a mower. So
You want to put weeds down around the airport?
Yep. The FAA will not buy a mower. That's why they say that. But if you decide to go out and buy a mower to put behind it, you'll be fine. So that's that piece of equipment and that project. You guys have any questions on that one?
For Josh and Willie new on the council, then you just might reconfirm up that piece of equipment has to stay at the airport. We can't bring it into town and
It
help.
does, because it is FAA money and it's very specific in the intent and the use. It is meant to be, and oddly enough, we're probably going to get like a John Deere tractor and we're going to paint it yellow because the FAA says we have to paint it yellow. So it's the silliest things, right? So this is the fun part of working with the federal government and the strings that are attached.
And the rest of the money, we'll build a building.
Oh, yeah. And so the way that the 159,000 is, it could change every year, but we're kind of assuming it's 159,000 and it's it's once per year for 5 years. So total, you got a 159,000 fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, 24, 25, 26. We're kind of using the first 1.5 years of the money for this equipment. And then the intent is by fiscal year 26, we're basically saving that money up and we'll be able to do another project. And that project would be, we're thinking an SRE building is really the intent. And
SRE.
snow removal equipment, sorry.
Thank you.
That's I speak in acronyms sometimes, so.
A lot of that around here.
Basically, we'll build, just a pole barn or something. You guys can park that
We
equipment.
get like 800,000 in the 5-year period.
You would, yeah. So, and it might go down. So it's they recalculate the formula every year. And so what we've been seeing is it's for smaller general aviation airports like Wheatland, it's kind of varied between 110 to 159,000. We're kind of hoping you guys stick at the 159. If it goes down, we'll adjust accordingly. There's a few other GA airports that are actually getting more than that, but they're kind of non-typical, I would say. So.
And then just to reiterate, this bid process has nothing to do with the town. The town isn't involved in looking at the bids or anything. That's all you with the feds.
Well, yeah, you guys. I mean, ultimately you are, but yeah, we handle that process.
We're not going out trying to find out.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's under your name, but we're doing it on behalf. So.
And this is the Buy American.
There's a lot of criteria, so that's why we don't have to.
And that's
We're not locked into local.
You're never locked into local. We have that preference provision if anybody bids.
well, we don't on this one because
Oh,
it's
you don't?
federal.
Oh,
Because
okay.
federal, you're not allowed to do the state preference.
Oh, aren't you?
So,
Okay.
and this one,
Yeah, that's why I said that.
Yeah.
and it is Buy American, like Candy said, and that actually is probably the hardest thing because honestly, there's nobody in this country building a tractor here 100% American. Like more than likely, we'll probably have to do some sort of waiver. There's I'm not going to bore you with the tiers, but there's different types of waivers. We're anticipating we're going to have to do one because we've talked to the John Deere guys and they're like 60% of our tractor is made American, because the transmission comes from somewhere, right? It's just the way it works.
So after the selection of the bid, awarding the bid, I guess, will we actually see this equipment this year or will it be out next year?
I don't, that's a really good question. I don't know. So we're kind of it depends. We're anticipating 365 days. This piece of equipment generally is pretty standard. We're not getting anything too crazy. It's more or less what you would go and pick up anywhere as a piece of agricultural equipment. But with COVID, who knows, as we've gone through this, it could be 2 years. we're gonna take the approach of through bidding as we're talking to people. If people are telling us like, yeah, man, I can't get this piece of equipment for, 18 months, then we'll adjust and we'll get more time. But I'm optimistic that we'll get it in a year. And it really does depend, because if they have it on the lot, have one ready, then you may get it in a few months. If they don't have it on the lot and they're somewhere in John Deere's or Case's mystical queue of you get delivered when you get delivered, then who knows? So.
And on the SRE building, I'm hoping that we have enough funds to build big enough for like the courtesy car that's out there. We can park that inside the attachments, and then maybe even, the pilot's lounge part of that building and get rid of that little building that's there. Just clean it up a little bit out there. But we'll have to see how much money we have.
In the same spot as the little building.
Yeah, I think that's been kind of the plan as we've been angling through this. Is like I did like at a minimum build you like a pole barn big enough to park this equipment. If we can get a little bit bigger, build you a pilot's lounge as a place for people to go and rest. So pilots that land, they call pilot's lounge. They like to have a place to go and have a couch, typically a bathroom, TV, a computer. Really, because the biggest thing you're trying to accommodate is the pilot that weather gets bad and they got to land, right? They need a place they can kind of hang out. They might be there for a day or two. That's the same reason you have the courtesy car, is you're hoping somebody comes and lands and spends the day, and they come in town and spend some money. So that's the goal. And if we can get that to fit in there, it'd be really nice. So then next up is we're also working with the town. This is also using federal money. So beyond the BIL, you guys are also allocated called entitlement funds. And so it's exactly, you are entitled $150,000 per year of federal money through the AIP program, which is the Airport Improvement Program, which basically it's similar like the Highway Trust Fund, which it uses. Highway Trust Fund is based off fuel sales for cars that then funds the Highway Trust Fund to do projects. The Airport Improvement Program is funded very similarly. It's funded through jet fuel sales or aircraft fuel sales. So when you fly a plane, technically you pay into the Airport Improvement Program. And so then they divide that money up. And so as you guys, the classification of your airport to $150,000 a year it's very much the same thing as the BIL, but you get it repeatedly. And it's meant to be for infrastructure projects or whatever else we can come up with. Used to be $150,000 a year to actually get a lot of projects done anymore. That's not the reality, as you probably understand.
Is that the program that sometimes we get it from other airports and then we don't get it the next year?
Yep. And so, the way that program works is, so every airport in the state, if you're part of NIPIA, the NIPIAS airports, which is the National Public Airport Infrastructure Program, every airport gets that. And so usually the way they do projects is they might shuffle money around, because Douglas might be planning to do a project in 2 years, or Wheatland's trying to do it this year. So you guys might actually borrow Douglas's entitlement money for this year, and then you would just swap it. And basically the idea is there's this much money out there, and there's ways to shuffle things around and make everybody whole. So the project we're currently working on is, as probably like long history, Doug can attest to this, going back 20 plus years, is you guys are kind of a strange airport in that you do not own the land the hangars sit on. Every other airport out in the country is the airport owns the land and they do long-term leases to hangar owners, and they either build the hangars or they own the land and they lease the land back and let them build hangars for storing aircraft. Yours is all private, and so really the big hang up is the FAA doesn't like that, because their concern is that it's an airport and they want you as the town to have control of that space. So we've been working with them through the process. They've always indicated we really want the town to own the land under the, they don't want to get rid of the hangars, they just want you guys to own the land and have the control to do what you need to do. And so, been really angling that way a long time. So we're using 2 years of entitlement, that 150,000. So we're using, I believe it's fiscal year 2021 entitlement and fiscal year 2022, and that's the federal fiscal year, which is October 1 through September 31st. And so we started that process, and then the state of Wyoming actually they've got another program, the White Hot Aeronautics, which is through their transportation group. They also have funding sources that they can implement as well, and so they've actually agreed that they're putting extra money into that program also. I think they're, whatever it is, total money, we got $500,000 to acquire some hangars. So we started that process, oh man, probably a year and a half ago. And really the goal was we really, nobody likes to take people's land, right? And that's really what this comes down to is, so we want to be open and transparent on how this works. So we started going through and developing like a lease agreement, because all of these hangars, they're on private land right now. And basically after we buy the hangar and the land back, the assumption is that they've got an airplane in there. They're going to want to lease that. They're going to want to keep using it as a hangar. So the town will then basically sign a lease back to them. The day you guys close, you buy it, we sign a lease back. So we started with the lease process. We got a few drafts out there. They got a hold of it. We got a lot of pushback. So originally we were just going to buy the land and not the building. And then basically we decided not to go that way. So we are buying the land and the building now. But really, we finally made a decision a few months ago to really get moving forward. And we approached Dallas Mount. He has the first hangar it's closest to the runway, closest to the apron. It's the very northeasternmost hangar. Approached him to go through the process and start acquiring it. Acquisition is governed, because it's federal money, it's governed by federal rules. There's a specific CFR that determines how that's done. I'm trying to think. Basically, the way I put it is it has to be fair. The intent is the government can't pay you more than what it's worth, and the government at the same time can't rip you off either. So we're going through that process, which involves like the town actually hires an appraiser. It's a special appraiser. They're called they have to be certified through this federal program to be that kind of appraiser. The town has hired that appraiser. We've gone out, we'll appraise the property, and then actually WIDOT through their right-of-way department, because as you can imagine, they do acquisition quite frequently. They also have an appraiser, and they do a review appraisal. So basically the idea is that two appraisers should be able to agree and come to an agreement on like, this is the true value of this piece of property. And so we started doing that with Dallas Mounts hangar. And then we started going through that process. I've reached out to 2 more hangar owners. I think it's the 3rd one in to the south, so 2nd one in from Dallas's. And then I've skipped one, and then I've approached that owner too, which is somebody like TeamCom Limited. And so we are planning to do the appraisals on March 31st. The overarching goal is we want to get purchase agreements in place for all 3 of them. So we go through the appraisal process, review appraisal. Once we have that, we have an established price. We can then approach the owner and say, hey, here's what we can pay for this. And we basically open up negotiations at that time. And then the intent is that we can reach a mutual agreement on, yeah, that's fair, purchase agreement. And the goal for the FAA, they because it's grant funded and there's cycles that typically run with those, they have to have the purchase agreement in place by June 1st. So that's really what we're trying to do, is get negotiated and have the purchase agreements in place so that then the FAA will then issue the grant, and then we can close on the property probably June or July.
For this plus or minus 500,000 first.
Yeah. And so
first.
I'll tell you too, with that 500,000, the original intent was I'm trying to maximize it as much as possible. It's kind of weird because now that we're buying the hangars as well, it's kind of like now you're buying something that's way bigger in value. So how flexible can we really be? There's probably going to be some money left on the table because I'm not going to go over that amount because that's the last thing I want to do. But pretty much that's where I'm kind of at. That's where we've settled on these 3 specific hangar owners. There are 2 vacant lots out there, and I did approach them to see if they would be interested, and they more or less are not. They want to retain ownership. They want to build hangars on there, and then their intent is to sell you. When their time comes, they want to sell you the building too. So their thought is they're going to make more money by doing it that way. So
So how many hangar owners are there out there?
I believe is it 23? I want to say. This process is going to take a very long time.
This won't happen over years.
I mean, I will just tell you, like, we're doing this chunk because we are trying to show the FAA that yes, the town is very serious. We want to do this. We want to be moving forward, but it's also the same time the FAA is not sitting there. They also understand that you just don't have infinite money pockets and you can't just start writing checks like crazy. So I don't know how long this process is going to take. It could take a really long time. We do what we call a capital improvement plan for your airport every year, and we've got it planned for this year. We're doing the acquisition projects for these hangars, and then we've got coming up, we want to actually reconstruct your guys' apron at the airport because it's falling apart. You have a brand new runway, which is really nice, but where you park the aircraft is almost gone. So that project's falling in the middle, and then the plan is to get back to this again in a few more years. I think it's 2028, and then try to chew off a few more, and then we'll keep going. And it is going to take a really long time. So,
And out of that 500,000, that isn't just for land acquisition. That isn't just for the land. We also are paying the appraisers out of that, and you guys out of that.
and I would add to that.
So we don't have a full
Yeah.
500,000 just for property.
Because we kind of, it's not really engineering per se, but we kind of play the role of we're just more like administrators. We just try to make sure that this process moves along. We're professional services, we got to get paid. And then the appraiser, they get paid. You actually pay YDOT for their review appraisal. We're also doing phase 1 environmental site assessments because all that's really doing is we're just trying to confirm that the land you guys are buying isn't contaminated with some weird environmental thing. It's probably a little bit paranoid, but actually we've managed to get that covered. I believe talking to another consultant that does that type of work, I think they're actually going to cover that through a Department of Environmental Quality grant, so you guys won't even have to pay it. So that'll be good. But that's more to make sure that you guys don't buy something that you don't want to buy. So, because if they had major oil or gas contamination, if you bought it, you'd be responsible for clean up on it. So that's what we're trying to get a feeling that we're pretty safe. I don't expect there to be any issues, but you never know.
So by us now owning these hangars, and we're responsible for all the upkeep and anything that needs to be taken care of on this.
So
Just like
Depends on how we design that lease.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been really not difficult, but they've been really aggressive on. They want us to buy I've always said this, and it's not to degrade them, because it's how they negotiate or want to negotiate. It's basically, we want you to buy them, but we still want to own them, and control everything in it. So we have to design it. My theory is it's basically going to be a net lease, which means they cover all the costs on the deal while they lease it. And then I think Josh has figured out basically per square foot what we should lease them at. And it's a little higher than if we just owned the land, because now we own the building and stuff, and go from there.
And the lease will be pretty much the same for roughly
Yes.
all 23, not
And
six.
that's gonna be the hardest part, because, you know, some of the hangar, if you drive out there, you have T hangers, you have a couple T hangers, you've got those bifold door hangers, you've got those huge, I mean, from one hangar to the next, it changes.
All different, huh?
Yeah, it's not like you have just a row of a hangar building. And
There's some really nice ones, and there's some that are kind of like look like they're gonna fall over the next time the ride blows too hard. So,
And then we'll be, because it's federal money, they want us to own everything, then we'll also be forced in our lease that they will be hangars and not toy barns.
yes.
and that is probably the biggest thing.
Toy barns, no campers, no.
Because
And they won't be able to have certain hazardous materials in there.
It really what the FAA wants is their big thing is they give you guys money every year to maintain to build on your airport and make it better, right? And their expectation is that if you're gonna have areas set aside for hangars, that it's people with airplanes that are using it, which honestly makes sense, right? Because if it's used as storage for some guy, that's not a benefit to pilots. They want it to be used for aeronautical use. So, and they do. They don't have really crazy requirements. They kind of go hot and cold on this. Sometimes they really do care about that a lot. Other times they don't. I will tell you this much though. If you guys ever wanted, if we got to a point where we did own all these hangars in some far off time, and we started having discussions like, hey, we've got demand, we've got 5 people that want hangars built next year. We want to be able to expand that hangar area. If the FAA does not feel like all your hangars have got airplanes in them and they're not being used for that, they're going to be hesitant to fund you, because why would they? They got to put down a taxi lane and infrastructure and everything else. So that's really the crux of how it works.
So Josh, what do we need to do to get this grant going so we can be reimbursed for what we've already spent?
Yep.
And to buy the hangars? What do we need?
So really what we need to do is, like I mentioned, that June 1st date is when the FAA has said, hey, for this grant cycle, we need to have a signed purchase agreement. So the town and the hangar owner needs to agree that, yeah, we're gonna pay this much money. It's not actually like a closing, but it's basically almost as good as closing, right? Because the FAA, the way their grants are set up, they're reimbursements. So you can't get paid until you've actually spent the money. But obviously, they also understand that the town doesn't necessarily just have $500,000 sitting in the bank that they can only just write a check for 2-3 hangars and for paying us and everything else. So really, to make this happen, we have to have the appraisal done. So we've got one appraisal done. We're going to get the 2 other appraisals done next week. And then we'll have the phase 1 environmental site assessments. We'll get those going, get those done. And we have to get negotiated with each landowner to get that purchase agreement. And part of the negotiation is the lease agreement. So the lease agreement needs to pretty much be, I will tell you in my conversations with Dallas Mount, I get the feeling he's not as worried about the appraisal. My feeling is I think he feels like he's going to get a fair price. I think where he's going to be hung up and where other ones are probably going to be hung up is on the lease agreement. That they want to see that and make sure that they've got a fair lease. And so, some of the things we've got to work through is how long you want the leases to be for. The FAA is kind of good with up to 50 years. So I kind of threw out there like 30 years. They're long-term leases, right? They're meant to be. They should be. And like Doug mentioned, the net part, I think that's reasonable. I've already developed some prices on kind of what I think the square foot price should be, and the square foot prices that I developed are based on YDOT, the Aeronautics Division in 2018 did a study, a regional study, and they called it a rates and charges study. They asked airports in all of Wyoming and all of the surrounding states, kind of like, what are you guys charging for hangar leases? What are you charging for fuel? What are you charging for this? And that is the reference I have. So I looked at that and I kind of said like, airport's comparable to Wheatland, right? We're not looking at Cheyenne, we're not looking at Jackson, we're looking at like Lander, we're looking at Powell, we're looking at Douglas, those type of places, and seeing what their prices are and develop some recommendations on like, this is what I think you could charge. I think this is reasonable. I would say ultimately the FAA's hope is that you charge a reasonable rate, but the expectation is it is always somewhat a subsidized rate too. And that kind of goes back to the other part of like why we want these to be used for aeronautical use and not storage, because arguably you could probably lease one of these hangars for less than you could lease like a storage unit in town per square foot. And that's, we don't want to be subsidizing people's storage. So.
So, what do we get, by June 1st, we have, get our lease, there it is and done?
We got to be negotiated with the landowners. We have to have them signed on the dotted line that they're agreeable to sell it.
So
Like they're gonna wanna see the lease before they agree to sign.
And then Candy could do the grant.
Yep. And we've already applied for the grant, and it's basically there. It's just waiting on. We just got to be able to tell the FAA how much to write the grant for, and that's where they're coming from, because they can't write an open checkbook. They have to be like, okay, we know we've got 3 lots, and we've got to pay the engineer, and we've got to pay the appraiser. Here's what's due. This is what they will write the grant for.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's ready, it's waiting.
Oh.
Yep.
Has it
That's one of
reappraisal
those
been
things.
completed on the one?
Not yet, no. So we are working through that. He said he did a quick review, but I expect we'll have it back pretty quick. So,
The reappraisal
the review. Yeah.
on,
Dallas
oh,
is-
okay, the review on
Yep.
analysis, because the first appraisal was done.
Yes. Yep.
So it's okay.
And then, I think the thought was, honestly, the first one was going to be the hard one because they're kind of different. But once you have one, you kind of know that what they should go for. So hopefully it gets easier.
So if we miss the June 1st deadline, are we penalized, are we lose, are we out money?
You're not penalized, but basically the grant cycle doesn't open up again until May of next year. So if we don't hit by June 1st, then you've got to then wait till the next time. You can still go forward with closing the sales, but you will not get reimbursed by the FAA until then. And I will tell you, you guys have already paid me a lot of money, and you've not been reimbursed for it. So
And then we'll have already paid the appraisers.
you're gonna have to pay the appraiser. You're gonna have to pay all those other things. So it'd be beneficial to get this done. By June 1, we should be in a really good spot to get this done. So.
So what's your take on a fuel system?
I would love for you guys to get a fuel system.
I don't want to manage it. Or
Yeah,
I
and
don't
then
want the town to manage it.
you don't want the town to manage it. Yeah, that's the hardest part. It's tough. There's a few ways to approach that. The thing is, you guys are probably a small enough community with enough around you that there's not necessarily a benefit for like a fixed base operator is what they call it, where you guys could contract out the fuel services and aircraft maintenance services to somebody else. But like I said, it's an economic thing because that person has to feel like they're going to write an agreement with you. You're going to say, hey, you're gonna lease this from us and you're gonna be able to do these services, but they have to feel like they can make money, right? So that's the tough part. So that's kind of the two ways this is approached a lot of times in communities is either the community owns the fuel system and they basically, it's self-serve. They just make sure there's fuel in there. People come up and they use it, and then you just have to competitively market your prices. You arguably probably don't care to be cheaper than Cheyenne, but you obviously want to be cheaper than Torrington. If you want people coming in, you want to sell more fuel. That it's a complicated one. I think my personal opinion is I think without the town owning the fuel system, I think it'd be pretty hard to do it any other way. So, but without fuel, it's also not. It's really hard to attract people that come to your airport too, and arguably your community. So it depends. It's a weird one. So
It's a catch-22.
it kind of is, and it's a very expensive system. I mean, I will tell you, we work with a lot of communities that honestly, I'm working with one that they've got a fuel system and they make pretty good money off that fuel system, but it's now at the end of its useful life, and they're in the situation where probably in the next 5 years they have to replace it, and they're gonna have to dole out a big bunch of money to be able to do that. And so, what does that look like? So it's a tough one. I will tell you, there are some airports that are very good and very savvy at marketing that and running it like a business. Rock Springs, it's not necessarily a good comparison, but Rock Springs, their airport, they sell tons of fuel, and the airport actually owns the fuel system, and they sell the fuel, and they more or less have, they don't, that airport's not sustainable 100% on its own, but it helps. So, but that's a different airport too and a different base, because they're also, their benefit is they get to market the Salt Lake traffic. They actually market the jets that land in Salt Lake, and they charge less. So the corporate jets fly to Salt Lake, kick the people off that matter, and then the corporate jet goes and lands in Rock Springs, and it stays there overnight. So,
Did Guernsey ever get theirs up, back and going again?
I don't know if Guernsey ever did. Guernsey's kind of a weird airport because it's like actually owned by the military, so it's kind of a different animal entirely. So we've got a lot of work to do between now and June 1st, but I think we can get it done. And that's really, our goal is to help you guys get there and push it along as much as possible. So.
Is there anything I can do to help you?
I don't think so. I think the lease agreement's the biggest thing. If we can get that really nailed down, because I would like to think that we can start approaching Dallas in the next few weeks. We have the review appraisal and start that negotiation process. And then once we go through Dallas, I think then I will tell you one of these hangars. It's actually the second one that I called. He is not interested. He's using that as storage. He doesn't want it as an aircraft hangar. So I think he's gonna pretty much turn it over to the town, and then you guys will be able to go out and find someone to lease it as an aircraft hangar. So that'll be good. He actually, I will mention this. He's mentioned that he would like some time to just clear out all the stuff he has in there. I told him we probably can just work something short term out. Like even in the purchase agreement, we might just negotiate like, hey, you got to vacate it by, I don't know, October 31st. He kind of mentioned, he's like, just give me the summer to get my stuff out. So, and part of that is if we purchase it from him, give him a bunch of money, maybe he goes and builds a storage unit on his place and moves all the stuff. I don't know. So that will be good.
Do we have to, as a council, approve the lease that you come up with?
Probably should, but we need to, it's a kind of a catch-22 because we don't know exactly. Truthfully, they got a hold of a lease and it became a real wreck at that point in time. And so, and then the next lease I got was from the people that drafted them was 32 pages. Nobody wants to read 32 pages. So I'm going to try to, Torrington has one, I think it's like 7 or 8 pages long. And so I've been mulling it over, kind of figuring out what we can put in there.
That's just one, if we had to approve it, we just got 2 meetings.
Right. You'll have to have a special one if we have to approve it, but you would hope everything's standard, but I don't know if we can get everything standard from each. It makes it cleaner, but it, with the different, one we don't know about, and then a couple of the others, so we'll just have to work through it.
So will they have to approve each individual one with each
They
individual
might
hanger?
have to, depending on how we negotiate it out. I mean, that's the kicker on this stuff. I maybe Josh sees it different. I don't see them all being the same.
It'd be nice if they were, and that was kind of the first approach. And like what we did is we actually hired a consultant that, honestly, they're a little, they were a pretty heavy-handed lease, but they honestly, what they do is they're called the Airport Management Consulting Group, and they're not engineers like me. They're in the business of trying to help airports be successful. And honestly, they're kind of really good at writing leases. I think the difference is that the lease that works in Wheatland, Wyoming is not the same lease that works in somewhere in Colorado, or a bigger city might have a different expectation. So I think there's probably a middle ground between a 7 or 8 page lease versus a 32 page lease that, because what it comes down to is when you take this federal money, you sign these, every time you take one of these grants, there's all these assurances, there's strings attached, and it's really a matter of trying to keep on the FAA is not hunting for people to make sure that they're not complying, but you should still try to make sure you're doing everything right. And that's really what the overarching goal is, to make sure that we're doing that with this lease agreement and that it's addressing some of those issues. So, and then keeping it fair too. So it is. I think where we might be able to negotiate more is probably on the lease rates. I think it's more of coming up with a band, because honestly, some of those, but if it is a net, it probably doesn't matter, because long term they're responsible for all the maintenance on the hangars anyways. So, and I think the way the prices that I've kind of thrown out there is per square foot, I don't think those leases are more than a couple $1,000s a year, if even that.
The great big ones.
The great big ones, yeah. I mean, some of those most hangars are about 2,000 square feet, and they're 20 to 22 cents a square foot is kind of the number we've thrown out. Maybe you go up to 30 cents if we really want to get crazy. That's you're not at a ton of money. So honestly, these people probably, well, I don't know, sales tax might be only a couple $100s a year, or property tax. Is there any other questions?
Oh, how much are we in debt already that we would like to get reimbursed approximately?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I think I've billed you probably 55,000, I want to say. And then, yeah, I don't know what the appraiser is going to be.
Will that come directly to?
That will come directly. Have you seen it yet?
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if Chris has got that done. So, and then yeah, YDOT. But I think YDOT, it's pretty.
They're really reasonable.
They're going to be like $1,500 for everything. I bet. So.
Enough that it makes it nice that we'd get it, like June 1st, to get a grant to get some of that back.
Oh, yeah.
And the biggest thing is they won't write a grant for the engineering fees only. They'll write a grant. They have to be able to prove that they got some sort of deliverable. And honestly, my fees aren't a deliverable. So sorry.
Well, we could always change it to, depending on you getting the leases done.
Oh man, I'm not that good.
Yeah, you are.
My bosses won't let me do that either. They'll show me the door.
As I said one time, engineers are the best people getting the last money out of a grant I've ever seen.
I like how the attorney is saying this.
Yeah.
Trust me, you don't see me getting a check out of these grants.
Yeah, that's the only way we get paid, honestly. So.
Well, the longer it goes on, the more we're paying you.
Yeah.
Arguably, yeah. And that's another thing too, is I
Why are you dragging your feet?
don't
He
want
isn't.
to. I want to get this thing
That is not.
done. I will tell you, I actually estimated my fee super high on this because I didn't know how involved it was going to be. Because negotiating with one landowner might be a 1 hour phone call, right? Some it might be 20 hours. I negotiated pretty high. I actually think that I hope that I'm leaving money on the table when this isn't the type of projects I want to do. I want to do the apron project for you guys.
So the lease, is that yearly?
No, it'll be a long-term lease. They'll pay you yearly.
So the 22 cents would be whatever.
Let's say if it's
440,
1,000, yeah,
440, a 2,000 square foot hangar, $440 a year.
yes.
They pay the
Is
town.
it- yeah, I'd have to go back and look, and 20 cents might have been just the ground lease, and the building lease might have
I
been.
thought it was higher than that.
It might be 60 cents or something.
So when those funds come in,
You put it in your airport.
I would just say we have to make sure that money goes back to the airport, just like when we sold, when we tore up all the runway and make sure that money went back.
I don't think it necessarily has to, but I think best practice would be that it does. Because
Especially if you're coming back for more all the time.
all these grants you get, they're match grants. You don't get 100% grant. They're 90% federal, and typically YDOT has done 6%. So that gets you up to 96%, and then local share is usually 4%. So 4 cents on the dollar is pretty good for any project. And so it's, but yeah, that's the thought though, is if you can build up these leases and you guys start getting a little nest egg of money, maybe that helps offset your match when you do big projects every 5 or 10 years.
Any other questions? This music's about to put me to sleep.
You can hang it up.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
I'll try to call you.
So I guess that ends, unless there's any other discussion regarding 2 items. Other than that, I guess the special meeting is over, and the next regular scheduled meeting will be April 10th.